Well, thank you, everybody. Thanks for joining. Welcome to the Meditation Conversation. I'm your host, Kara Goodwin, and we're recording this with the Conscious Awakening Network. So whether you're here with us live on Zoom or you're watching on YouTube or on the Conscious Awakening Network, I welcome you. And I'm so excited today to have my friend Reuben Langdon here with me. Welcome, Reuben.
Hi, Kara. How's it going?
It's going great. I always love spending time with you. I'm going to give a little bit of an introduction here as we get started. Reuben Langdon is an acclaimed actor, filmmaker, and renowned stunt performer who has seamlessly transitioned his passion for storytelling into the world of consciousness exploration. With a career spanning both Hollywood blockbusters and groundbreaking projects relating to consciousness and spirituality, Reuben has a unique perspective to reality. I'm continuously inspired by Reuben's creativity and ingenuity as a multifaceted artist and thought leader. And it's just a blessing to be with you, Reuben. In case anybody's new to your story, can you start by talking about your journey from stunt performer and actor to becoming a leading figure in the field of consciousness exploration?
Wow. Well, thanks for that awesome intro. Yeah, I started, let's see, when did I start my exploration into stunts and sort of the action world and TV, movies. I moved to Japan when I was 19 and reluctantly I joined some modeling agencies out there just so I could put food in my mouth. It wasn't really something I was wanting to do, if you could say that way. It was just something that I could do to easily make some money because I was a starving, I wouldn't say artist, but a starving tourist. Just trying to emerge myself in the Japanese culture and soak it up because I had a passion for learning Japanese and martial arts. And let's see, it was about, I don't know, 6 months into my modeling career when I got an invitation to go to an audition for a TV show, which is sort of like the Power Rangers in that veins by the same folks out there in Japan. And I ended up booking the role of Mac Wendy. I always call it the originality back then. This was in the 90s, mid 90s. So it was McDonald's and Wendy's, the ultimate American hero. Fast food hero.
Oh my gosh, that's funny.
So they combined those two. Like, okay, Mac Wendy, he's our exchange student from New York. He's coming to help the Japanese guys beat up the monsters. And so that was my role, and it was a 6 month, about 6 months to a year. Sort of, I was a regular, not all the time, but I would pop in whenever they needed help. I'd pop in and help fight the bad guys, and realized that I could do acting, which I was enjoying much more than modeling. It was more challenging than just, walking and smiling. And using, the language, learning the language. So I really learned a lot of Japanese very quickly because I had to immerse myself in the scripts and learn how to read and then act properly and make sure I knew what I was, reading, or the script knew what was going on to make sense of it all. And then I was doing martial arts. So I was doing my passion of martial arts, but in this different way. And I always say I would feel super blessed because it was the first day of shooting was my 21st birthday. And it was like a gift from the gods, so to say, because I was on set doing my thing and I'm like, this is amazing. I'm going to do this the rest of my life. And for quite several years afterwards, to some extent, I was, putting on suits, doing martial arts and acting and fighting for a good, 20 years almost. After that, and then moving into, the stunt industry and in Hollywood into motion capture with the video game work. And then on Avatar with James Cameron as Jake Sully's main stunt double, and then doing various roles as the Na'vi. So always moving, performing, fighting. That was a big part of my journey. and then it was while I was working on Avatar when I sort of had a UFO sighting, and that changed my paradigm, rocked my world, and redirected me into this other direction of exploration into consciousness and ETs and spirituality, and I had a little bit of that with my martial arts background, and studying in Japan, and meditation is a big part of the martial arts exploration. There's always an emphasis on finding the balance of the inner and the outer. In different martial arts like Tai Chi and Qigong and Pagua, and there's other martial arts that sort of focus more on that work. That wasn't really my interest. I was more about, I just want to look cool and kick ass. Uh, but I made that shift, and as I started understanding the value of more exploration into those inner practices and how it correlated with consciousness exploration, then I changed my emphasis and started doing breath work and more internal martial arts. So that's a super rough nutshell of
Of
beginning to
few
now. We can go
decades,
into
yeah.
any details you want.
Yes. Well, I thank you for giving us that background, and I do wanna encourage anybody, you're welcome to ask questions. If you wanna raise your hand, feel free to do that. Um, I'm curious about, that's about the evolution of your work and your beliefs, because things have changed so much and they're changing so fast. And
Yeah.
I love your work, and I've noticed, just the evolution and how things change. And I notice this within myself too. The things that I'm focused on change from year to year, moment to moment. I don't know. Are there things that you can share about what's become kind of less of a focus compared to a few years ago, or more of a focus?
Yeah. So, the having that sort of visual ET or UFO experience, at that time, I couldn't say it was ET or not, but sort of going in that direction, assuming that was the direction of what I was experiencing was ET related. So I started really diving into that ET exploration and trying to unpack all the information that I could and digest as much as I could from different sources. And in the beginning, I was more focused on the evidence-based stuff. So, like I produced in 2013, I produced this citizen hearing on UFO disclosure, which is free now on YouTube. You can just type in UFO disclosure citizen hearing, and that was a 5-day mock congressional hearing in in Washington D.C., sort of an activist movement to push Congress to do the right thing and hold official hearings, which they finally last year started doing. So that was really the beginning, was just trying to figure out the nuts and bolts, like the physical, the spiritual part was, I had a little bit of, I was doing meditating and qigong, and that was when I was starting my internal journey, more going in that direction. Um, but I was still fascinated with this external idea of ETs. And then, of course, I started then talking to channelers and what they were bringing through and the different entities that they were bringing through. And then having tons of interviews and conversations. My show, Interview with Ed, is now 3 seasons. And now I'm doing the membership and the podcast. So it's like a weekly thing, and just always constantly exploring. And during that evolution, um, I go back to this famous saying that Bruce Lee had, and I remember this, and it hit me hard when I was still, in my early career in Japan, acting and doing martial arts. He said, a kick is just a kick, a punch is just a punch, and that's sort of when you first start the martial arts. Um, you're thinking about the punching and the kicking, and you want to do it right. And you're like, it's just a punch, it's just a kick. And then you do a punch 1,000 times a day. You do a kick 1,000 times a day in your training, and you're kicking, you're punching, you're kicking, you're punching. And you're trying every which way to punch and kick and punch and kick. And you're learning all these techniques. Okay, there's this way, there's that way, uppercuts and, roundhouses and this and spin kicks and all this stuff. And you do everything 1,000,000 or 1,000 times. And at the end of the day, punch is just a punch, a kick is just a kick. So you go through this evolution, and now that I've been through that with the ET exploration, um, and looking and trying to identify all the different ETs and this race and that race, and what are the archetypes of this, and how does that influence this, and hybridizations and zetas and Draco, and the whole lot. Um, at the end of the day, they're just ETs. Um, it's we overcomplicate things, and that's part of the journey. Is to really dissect and understand and get into all the nitty gritty. But really, at the end of the day, what matters is just the basics. So, unconditional love, compassion, forgiveness to others, and doing the self work. Like at the end of the day, it just comes down to that. So you can go into all these rabbit holes that you want, but it really simple is best.
I love that. You know, something I don't hear you talk about. I know your work pretty well. I'm actually in your membership group that you mentioned, and I've been I love to support your work, and I get a lot out of that community. Um, you don't talk a lot about Bigfoot, and I want to know why. What's your beef with Bigfoot? No,
No, I don't have any
or
beef
you
with
don't have
Bigfoot.
a curiosity about it, or I've missed it.
You probably missed it. I do have a curiosity. I actually am talking to a couple people who channel Bigfoot, so
Oh, okay.
we'll have those guests on soon.
I'm
But
projecting into the future then, I guess.
yes, well, my last, we didn't get into the Bigfoot conversation as much as I would like, but my last 2 weeks ago, my guest, Matthew Bueno, he actually really encouraged me to explore the Bigfoot because he's had many interactions. I think we talked briefly about it a little bit, but he calls it the macchiata, I think, is in his tradition. That's what they call them. Um,
Oh,
I
that's
think,
right. I did hear because I listened to I'm not all the way through that one, but
okay.
I do now that you're saying that, I do remember it. So I take that back. I have heard you, but please continue.
Yeah. So, I've had sort of one Bigfoot experience with Matthew. We were in Shasta. He's got a song that he sings for them. He had drum. He's amazing. Just he does sweat lodges, and just an amazing uh, sort of medicine man, shaman, and in his tradition, I think it's Lakota is his tradition. Um, and he brings through the energies of the Bigfoot, the macchiata, through his drumming. So whenever we do C5s and he's there, I'm like, make sure you do, bring them in, and we want to bring that energy in. So definitely, I love their energy. But yeah, it's just something that it's not. I guess I'm more because I started on that galactic path of going out into outer space and thinking about ETs and the different races. So it was not on my radar as much. And then now that I am with my research sort of coming back to Earth, so to say, um, they're definitely on my radar. So I'm looking forward to exploring more of them and who they are. And my understanding, based on the Bashar material, but it's sort of other material starting to support this, is that they are us in a sort of parallel reality in the evolution, which is a different version of Earth, much like sort of the Lemurian story and other stories where, and fairies and these types of other things where there was sort of a split in evolution. So there's a template overlay on top of Earth that we can connect to, and we are, as we're going through this ascension process, we are moving closer to their frequency. So the bridge is being built in a sense. So in certain energetic spots on the planet, out in the woods, and that's why you always sort of see them out in the woods, is uh, those portals, those ley lines, and those energy vortices are more congruent for bringing those phases in. So that's why they kind of phase into our reality, and then they're gone. They're in and out.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
because it seems like they can just disappear, like appear out of thin air and then disappear, and people think that they see them go through portals and things like that. Well, it
Yeah.
sounds like, but you did have a sighting?
Well, I had a hearing, let's say. Um,
Really?
so during our ceremony this was when I was filming this project around the crystal skulls. That's kind of went away, but um, we had Bill in the skull there, and we were in this sacred spot in Mount Shasta, and it was interesting because as we're walking to this spot, um, which is actually we'll talk later. That spot is gonna be one of our go-to spots in our workshops for the Lemurian Life Expo coming up. But as we were walking there, there's still snow on the ground, so you couldn't see on the ground. But there's a mandala, I think, on the ground. Anyways, we walked in it. You could literally feel there was like and I'm not super energy sensitive. I'm just, this is, the energy sensitive people, like I still have not, I never felt anything from the crystal skull. And I know a lot of people are like, whoa, they get blown, we call it skullawaska. They're getting blasted by the skull and going, going nuts. So several years hanging around Bill and that, I never felt that. But this time we walked into this area and it was like going through there wasn't fog, but you could feel almost a physical, tangible like shift in energy as we walked into that area. And I remember going, oh, this something we just walked into something different here. And it was really unusual. And then we start the ceremony, Matthew's beating his drums, and then we're hearing knocking in the trees. They like to knock on wood on the trees, like duck, 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 like kind of like a woodpecker sound.
Uh,
But Matthew goes, no, that's the macchiato. They're out there. And then I could hear breathing, heavy breathing, like kind of like an old man, like that maybe a little congested, or a bigger, heavier set person might have a
oh
little
my gosh. Like a wheezy kind
wheezy,
of?
yeah, like a wheezy
Uh-huh.
kind of breath. And I could hear it. I'm like, oh goodness. Okay, let's stay focused. So that was my first experience of, I guess, kind of having them close enough to experience that. Um, Again, I was filming, so I didn't really, I wasn't too, I wasn't able to sort of go inward and feel their energy and all that stuff. But I love the stories. Matthew's got great stories, other people and their stories. Willow, who's going to be one of our guests at the Lemurian Life Expo, he has some fun stories with him as well. So
Yeah, he's got all kinds of stories. That's cool. So that was in Mount Shasta,
yes,
and you're gonna have your Lemurian Life Ex is that or Lemurian Life Expo, right?
yes,
That's what
yep.
it's called?
Yep.
Yes, yeah, and so I'd love to know, maybe you wanna talk a little bit about why Lemuria, like why
Mhm.
that's the focus of it, why Mount Shasta, and, tell us about what the event will be like.
Yeah. So during my exploration on my show, I've gone down many rabbit holes, talking with many people, and I kept getting this pull and this call to go to Mount Shasta. There's several channelers and people in that area that I kept getting suggestions to interview, like Asara Adams and Briggy and Jules with the Stargate, and then a SEAL also was on my radar, and he does a lot of work up there with Pregrit and Jules. He's not far. He was in the Bay Area, so he takes trips up there. So
And you
um,
do a lot of work with Heather too, who's up there,
now,
right?
yeah, at the time I didn't know Heather.
Yeah,
Uh,
okay.
so Bill was staying with Heather and doing
Heather Taylor?
Crystal.
Is that right?
Heather Taylor,
Heather
yeah,
Taylor? Yeah.
yep. And she's one of the producers on the event. And but at that time I didn't know her, and so things were sort of. This was after COVID had hit. Everybody's trying to figure out what's going on. Um, at that time, this was summer 2020, so there were riots in Portland. There were fires across California,
Oh, I
uh,
forgot about that. Oh my gosh,
and
you're right. Wow.
yeah, and we were just trying to. Everybody was trying to figure out life. What are we doing here? By that time, I kind of knew things were a bit. The virus was not really what they were telling us. So I had enough information on that for the trip. So I wasn't afraid of going out, that I think at that time we were still kind of in lockdown. Um, but I hopped in my car, started driving up north with my buddy Steve, and the mission was sort of, okay, we're gonna go meet Bill and do some skull stuff, but at the same time, I want to understand and find out more about this story of Telos and Lemuria. And that's when you start diving into Mount Shasta history, that's a big part of that area, and that the energy in the mountain. And Telos is sort of this idea that there's a inner earth crystal city that humans, or Lemurians, ancient humans, still live, which sounds so fantastical, and it is quite fantastical. But as you dive into it, you realize, oh, that they don't mean like physical humans like us. This is and again, going back to that sort of template overlay of like the Bigfoot. This is an alternate timeline reality where human evolution went a different path, and they're sort of in their version of Earth in a sense. So if you go digging into the mountain, you're not going to find this inner city, unless maybe you hit the right spots and you're in the, vibrationally, you're a vibrational match for what that energy is around that city, and then perhaps you can experience that. And that's what a lot of people come back with. So people go to the mountain to meditate or hiking, and then there's tales on my show. I had Lowell Johnson who claims that he actually went inside. He was invited inside the mountain. Was that an actual physical invitation, which he perceives it as, or was it more of a meditation, astral projection? It's hard to say. That's where these things get a little dicey with the technicals and the exacts. I like to keep it very abstract, and that way we can all, instead of, yes, this happened, no, that happened, well, let's just go with it. Yeah, let's say astrally. Let's say astrally it happened. That's not hard to imagine. And many people make the same claims, similar claims of having connected with these tall, mostly Caucasian-looking people, about 7 to 8 feet tall, 9 feet tall, and there's this inner city of sort of run on crystals. And they're very advanced in their spiritual evolution, and they come from this timeline known as Lemuria. And so as I was meeting the different channelers and talking to different people in that area, that story was sort of unfolding for me even more and more. And then diving into more of the galactic beings that come through the channelings, through the other people that I've had on my show. They all speak of this ancient time where humanity was a little more. There was more of a feminine energy. It's sort of before the fall. If you hear those stories of the fall of humanity, the fall of Babel, and these types of heavier stories in many different texts. But before that, there was this more feminine oriented energy that was more coherent, and sort of peace on earth is the way the story goes. And many cultures talk about this, from the Maya to the Hopi, and then many sort of Polynesian cultures, Hawaiians, the Maori, and others have the same tale of this ancient land, Mu, this continent, sort of positioned in the Pacific, that existed, and that is where people lived in harmony. And then you can go, so that's in the sort of the ancient text and cultures, and passed down through story, and indigenous teachings. So that you have all this sort of correlation of that. And that's what Telos really represented, was this idea that when Mu was sort of full going, it was not just one big city. There was many different colonies all around this continent, and they were very interconnected with trade, and it seemed to be a very peaceful civilization. And they were very telepathic. They were more sort of in my show, we talk about different density levels of consciousness: fourth density, fifth density. different than dimensions. A lot of people talk about the 5D. You could probably correlate force density with the fifth dimension. So if people are familiar with that idea of the 5D, that that's probably where this civilization was existing in. They were very much heart centered and interacting with each other from the heart. So very peaceful and trade and all that stuff was happening. So they sort of this group, this Telosian group, and many others sort of caught wind that cataclysms were coming, that shifts were happening, that the fall is coming, basically, and they were, in a sense, warned and took refuge into the lava tubes of Mount Shasta. And I'm sort of paraphrasing a lot of different storylines. A lot of different people sort of share this story in their own unique way, and the details might be a little different based on the different people. I'm just sort of the collective body of evidence that I've been able to tap into. I'm sort of summarizing that and giving you that story. But so it's my understanding that the Telosian group went into the mountain, the cataclysms began. So they just stayed inside the mountain, and then using crystalline technologies, they developed their spiritual aspects of themselves. So in a sense, they continued on this path of evolution from 5D onward. So they, in a sense, uh, became their own reality, their own sort of timeline, separate from our reality on Earth. And that time, that was sort of when that fork in the road happened for them. Um, and then you hear tales of Shambhala and the Agartha networks, like from Tibet and Machu Picchu. Where these civilizations sort of disappeared. The Mayan civilizations. Where did the people from Machu Picchu go? So these are all, from my understanding, connected to this network of spiritually evolved civilizations or beings or groups, communities that were able to hold the frequency, while the frequency around our what we've been sort of observing from our history is sort of a different version of history, in a sense, where they were able to hold that frequency and then stay there now. So they're still thriving, the civilizations, they're still doing their thing. They're contacting with extraterrestrials or extra dimensional forces, and energies, and there's trade and spiritual sharing of spiritual evolution. And so this idea of Lemuria that I'm very excited to sort of dig into deeper around Mount Shasta and bring people to that is one, to share the story. Um, and because it gives us sort of an idea that there was something more than us just, evolving from this dark place, or, we all came from apes and whatever, the traditional story. This is sort of a different version of our history, which may resonate with people, may not, whatever, it doesn't matter. But it's a different, it's an option. It's a different version of our reality that um, we can choose to explore, and then find out, okay, what are those aspects of that society and that reality that perhaps we can integrate back into us, because it's my belief that we all have that memory, that collective memory in our DNA. We're part of that lineage. All we have to do is reactivate those sort of turned off DNA switches, and turn those back on, and then explore and have fun. Why not? If it doesn't resonate, that's fine. But if it does, there's no harm in going down this path and exploring these old ways in a new way. If that makes
Yeah,
sense.
I love that. Yeah, that's great. I do want to remind everybody you're welcome to raise your hand, or you can type a question. If you have a question for Reuben, you can type it in if you don't want to come on and ask yourself. Um, Reuben, I know that you've had some magical experiences yourself in Mount Shasta. We talked about Bigfoot. I know that there was also, I remember a story of somebody, like when the car got
Oh,
stuck
yeah, yeah.
in the snow. And so it's not really around Telos, but it does seem to just highlight the magic. I know Judith was saying in the chat too, she loves Mount Shasta and can't wait to go back. So maybe she's also, encountered some magic there. I've never been there.
Hmm.
And I would love to come. I actually, our family vacation is during that time, so I won't be able
Yeah.
to make this one, but maybe you'll do it again.
We we hope to, if this next one's successful, we plan to do a yearly out.
Oh, good, good. Um, But it seems like this really magical place. I don't know, do you feel like sharing the story of
Yeah.
the portal?
Yeah. Yeah, I'll try to do a short version. Basically, I this was a couple years ago. One of our last rounds, we were filming this project with Bill in the Skull, and Steve and I, another road trip back to Shasta. We were kind of doing this pretty regularly at the time, and we arrived pretty tired. So Steve ended up staying back, but that it was literally, I think, the day we arrived or the next day. We arrived pretty late, and the next morning it was like, okay, let's go do this thing. We're gonna go to there's a part of the mountain. I think it's called Onyx Mountain, and there's like a crystal lake or something. Anyways, there's uh, onyx depositories of where you can literally find these amazing onyx crystals. And so the mission was to go there. We were going to take the long way around. We found out there was a skull cave um, on the other side of the mountain. They're like, yeah, let's take the skull to the skull cave, and then let's go on the mountain and get some B-roll and just explore. So we're sort of doing this journey. It was myself, Heather, and her husband Ben, who are both a part of the producing team for the Lemurian Life Expo, and Bill and his ex-wife. Now they're back together. I don't think they're married. Maybe they got married.
They did get married,
They did
Catherine.
get married. All right, sweet.
Yeah.
Awesome. Congrats to them. So and they were in the car with the skull. So we're just driving around doing this thing, and uh, it's getting late. We're running out of gas. The nearest gas station is quite far. So we're like, okay, let's see if we can take the short way home instead of going all the way back around the mountain because of the snow initially. And this was, I want to say late May. So late May, you know, my TV, it's my Apple or something. I don't know what's going on. So we were starting to try to go the short way back home because we were low on gas and time, and it's getting dark, and we're going through these snow bunches, and it was a 4-wheel drive, but some places the snow was really thick, and we're kind of getting stuck. We're like, okay, I can't go this way. Let's back out. I had my drone. I popped it up, and I was trying to see if there's a clear way, and we ended up trying this one way, and some of these snow patches, Ben kind of floored it, and we would be able to get kind of like glide on the top and get through it. But this one, he went, and we went about halfway in the middle, and then it just stuck. And then he tried to put in reverse, and then we stuck, and then front and back, and then we were sinking because the
Oh
the snow was melting. Like, okay, well maybe but anyways, it was fixed. We were stuck, and we were trying to dig the car out with sticks and stuff, and it just wasn't happening. So we kind of hunkered down, and we're like, okay, well, now what are we doing? Now it's getting late, and there was no reception, so we couldn't make any calls. So we were just trying to figure it out. And Ben said, "Well, I volunteer. I'm going to go get. I'll try to find a signal and see if I can get help." So he takes off, and then we're all sort of hanging out just in the car telling stories. Several hours have gone by. Ben's still not back, and we're starting to get worried. So Heather and I,
he was just wearing, like, jeans and, like,
yeah, he
top or
had,
something, right?
yeah, he had like holy jeans and a hoodie and a t-shirt, and it was below freezing by this point. Um, and we, even though we had a little bit of gas, we'd turn on the car, warm it up, and then turn it back off, just to stay warm in the car. Um, and it was okay. We had like water and we had supplies, so we weren't going to starve to death and die or anything like that. But it was a little scary, for Kath too. It was not something that she's used to doing,
Yeah.
getting stuck in the middle of a mountain. Uh, so we're in the middle of nowhere. We have a magical crystal skull in the trunk, and and a bunch of onyx that we just grabbed from Onyx Mountain. And we're like, unload the onyx. Maybe we're not supposed to take it, So, like unloading the onyx, trying to see if that'll help us get us out unloose. So Heather and I, it was like, I don't know, by 1:00 in the morning or something, Heather and I said, we need to go look for Ben. Like he's been gone a long time, and we need to get a signal ourselves. So we go and we're walking for about 2 hours. And then we get to a place where there's a split in the road and we're like, okay, did he go this way or did he go that way? And we're trying to, I'm like, Heather, calm down. She was quite worried about Ben. And I, did a mountain lion get him? What's going on? There's all kinds of things. So I said, tune in. Which direction do you think he went? And she said, well, maybe the left, maybe the right. I don't know. She couldn't tune in. She was too scattered. And I was like, okay, well, let's go left. So we went left and, and then there was some signal, I think an owl signal us, and I said, yeah, let's go back, because by this time we were now thinking that Kath and Bill are going to be worried about us now. We're adding to the worry factor. So we decided to go back, and as we're walking back, the whole night, Heather's like hearing things in the woods, and she's using, telepathing all these different things. And then I see out of the corner of my eye, a quick flash, which for whatever reason, because I'd seen a fairy before in Big Bear, actually at the Eye of God. I think I told you that story.
Well, I saw them with you at my CE5 when I was with you. We all those the woman who does the sound bowls,
Yeah.
they were behind her, Latal. Yeah. Do you
Oh,
remember? But
oh,
they
I
were
don't.
all behind her. You don't
Oh,
remember?
yeah. Little flash. I remember my eyes were closed, and I remember seeing flashes and stuff.
Yeah, that was
And
amazing.
so that kind of energy, right? So I see that corner of my eye, and I'm like, ooh, fairy, and I stop, and Heather's like, oh, she was kind of surprised that I saw it too. She was seeing them, and we stopped right there to sort of see what was going on. I have night vision goggles that I carry for C5s, and I pulled them out, and I'm like trying to see, look for the fairies. And then all of a sudden our phones go off. Da-ding, da-ding, da-ding. We're like, messages are coming through. And we're like, what? And it was just this one, literally this 5-6 foot radius spot on the road where we had reception. It was just like a tiny bar. And if we hadn't stopped there and we just walked through, it wouldn't have been enough time for the signal to catch in. So we're there. We're like, oh my God, we got reception. Great. And so we started making calls, trying to get a hold of Ben. We weren't able to, but we were able to call for help, let people know where we were. And then we got a hold of Heather's daughter, who said Ben had called, and tried to get some help. And it was actually Matthew, who was on the show a couple weeks ago. And he had, apparently he was coming to help, but then he got stuck in the snow. So he went back, something like that. That was kind of it was hard to get here. It kept breaking up. So we're like, okay, whatever. At least they know we're stuck on the mountain. And then, apparently the Rangers, they don't come until the morning. They don't do work at night because it's too dangerous and they'll get lost too. So we were like, okay, well, at least we let people know. We still don't know where Ben is. Okay, let's just go back to the car, because otherwise we're gonna just make people worry. So we went back to the car. Heather's still kind of upset because she's not able to know exactly where Ben is, but she's tuning in. She's like, okay, he's okay. He's okay. And then I go back out again to that spot. So it's another hour plus hike to get to that spot. And I'm running there now, trying to get reception again. And then I make a call, and by this time the sun's coming up, and Steve answers. I'm able to get a hold of Steve, and then I'm telling him our situation. And he goes, yeah, hold on, hands the phone. And then Ben's voice is like, hey, Reuben, how's it going? I'm like, what? Where? where are you? And he's like, I'm here with Steve down the, I'm like, how did you, okay, we'll figure that out later. And, he's like, yeah, we're going to get shovels and we're going to come and get you guys. I know where you're at. So, Ben and Steve came to our rescue. Apparently Matthew did, uh, start to return back, but then Ben called Matthew and said, hey, Matthew, I'm where you were just at. How Ben knew that, I don't know. Ben said he saw these tire tracks, and for some reason, he just
Knew it
knew
was
those were Matthew's tire tracks. I'm like, how do you? Okay, whatever. And that place where Matthew got stuck, we sort of looked at it on Google Maps, and the only it was a 12-hour walk or more, 16 hours, I think, from where we are to that spot. We've mapped it out. And Ben said sometimes he would jog a little bit to keep warm, but he wasn't running. And all the time he would like pick up the pace a little bit. So we were like, there's no way possible that Ben could have gotten from where we were to that spot in that amount of time. So he feels like, he said, it was a very weird night. You know, he's walking alone, and he said he was looking at the stars, and some of the stars would change positions in some ways. He said it was very just odd. The whole situation was odd. But for him to get to that space in that short amount of time was just humanly impossible. You know, we were like, okay, something magical happened where Ben got teleported to that spot where uh, um, where Matthew was, and he somehow magically knew that those tire tracks were Matthew's, and he was able to get enough signal to call Matthew and say, "Come back, come back to the spot where you just at." I'm like, okay, sure, you know. 'Cause Matthew ended up getting stuck and said, "Forget it, I can't do this. We're gonna have to go back and wait till the morning, till it's light, and figure out a way." So that was sort of this adding to the magic and the mystery of what happens around Mount Shasta.
Oh my goodness. It's amazing. I mean, it is so magical. And did you say you're gonna do a CE5 at
Yeah.
the
We're gonna be doing 2, actually. The first night will be, sort of just a low key. This is everybody's invited, everybody who comes to the conference, and, it'll be more of, just a meditation, skywatching kind of thing. We're gonna do the next night, we're sort of doing a more intense workshop version, more of what you've been through with the breath work and, the connections. We'll have it's a smaller group, so we can do that. Yeah.
Okay. So, in case anybody hasn't heard of CE5, they may not know what we're talking about. So maybe let's just start with that.
Okay. Yeah. C5. It's a term coined by Dr. Stephen Greer, Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, which there's different stages of, I think it was originally, J. Allen Hynek, who was famous for Project Blue Book, back in the day, as a researcher, worked for the Air Force and studying the UFO phenomenon. So he sort of coined this term of Close Encounters of the Third Kind, which became a movie, and there's actually, a character in the movie based on him. Um, is sort of contact. You know, there's sort of the physical evidence based, uh, or sightings. I think the Close Encounters of the First Kind would just be like a sighting. Close Encounters of the Second Kind would be some sort of physical evidence left behind, like a footprint or a craft print in the soil, or a some sort of, like radiation signature that comes from some of the craft. That would be Close Encounters of the, Second Kind. Close Encounters of the Third Kind is, where you interact with the beings, or they contact you, and you have sort of an interaction. And I think fourth, I forgot what the fourth kind. Perhaps that may be where you're taken onto the ships. And then the fifth kind is human initiated contact. So, um, so what we do is we kind of sit in a circle in meditation, and we use intention and meditation to call them in, to bring them to us, in a sense. Um, And most, especially nowadays, in the early days when I first started doing these, I went to Stephen Greer's event in 2010 and started venturing into that world with him. And it was kind of hit and miss, 50-50. I'd go out to Joshua Tree and sometimes we'd see something, a lot of times not, whatever. Nowadays it's quite often we'll have something will happen.
Yeah.
At night you were there. There was a lot going on that night. Uh,
Yeah. I can testify. So
yeah,
I
yeah,
joined you out in Big Bear
yeah,
for CE5. That was what, 2 years ago, maybe?
yeah.
Um, and we've already talked about the fairies that we
Mhm,
saw. And because Latal was doing this amazing sound singing bowls, crystal singing bowls, and you were leading meditation. And so a lot of it is actually, and we did breath work,
mhm.
like you mentioned, but a lot of it is very inward,
Yeah.
with this kind of, and in fact, we have our eyes closed a lot of times. In fact, I was trying to think this morning, I think I've done 3 with you,
Oh,
3
wow. Okay.
CE5s. And the last one was Suzanne Ross's,
Oh, okay. That's right. You were there. I forgot.
retreat, yeah,
Yeah.
in the fall. And they had some guides there who were, from Sedona, and this was in Sedona, the first one was in Big Bear. And they were, so the guides were like not really doing the meditation so much. They were looking in the skies, and they said later, they're like, are they going to open their eyes? Because there's like so much going on up here. And,
Yeah.
and we were all having, well, a lot of us, having like inner experiences, but on Big Bear, I know I had a massive like visual that was really deeply moving, and I was like weeping, which is really uncharacteristic. And I shared this only once, I think, on the podcast with Caroline Corey. But I I saw this. It kind of reminded me. You mentioned earlier jewels, and
Agreed.
yes,
And the Stargate.
they do the Stargate, and they make these Stargates that have these, like, metal, but they're kinda intricate, but,
Mhm.
very geometric, and I hadn't seen those yet, but then when I did see those, I was like, "Oh, that's sort of like what I saw," but it was these thin gold lines in a geometric shape, and I was weeping and weeping, and you guys are like, "Are you okay? What happened?" I'm like, "I don't know. I don't know." And so 'cause I had no, like, reference point for why it was so moving for me. I
Right.
still don't really know. It's still pretty mysterious, but, yeah, that was that was amazing. So but that was a completely inner experience, and then we were seeing lights in the sky
Yeah.
and things like
Well,
that.
that so when I started doing contact with Lisa Royale, who actually used to be part of Stephen Greer's original CE5 team, and then she started branching off and doing her own thing. That's really when I started understanding the value of contact work in a inner healing type modality, not just so Stephen Greer's, he likes to go out and see the lights and talk about the nuts and bolts stuff, which is great. I think that it's a great entry point to the phenomenon and to people who are curious and want to see just to confirm that the phenomenon is real and there is a consciousness connection. We can sort of make that connection and call them in. But with Lisa and her work, it's more about the inner journey than it is about the lights in the sky. And it is and what you soon realize when you do this work is that it is connected. The more you go in, the deeper you go in, the more connections on the out you can make.
Mhm.
Um, and in, just studying basic philosophy and yin and yang and sort of understanding how polarity works, it all makes sense. So it really is this deeper inner journey, and then not having expectations or attachments to how it shows up in the outside um, reality. The more we can go deep inside and create a safe space for us, and that's essentially what I see the contact work is. As we're making these connections to these higher dimensional beings, in a sense, uh, triggering traumas that may be stored in our body. So almost like a psychedelic experience where if you or shamanic experience where you take a shamanic medicine, whether it's ayahuasca or mushrooms or just going on a shamanic journey through drum work or a sweat lodge or whatever. There's many practices out there for with indigenous teachings and things. So and what they're doing is, a sense, they're trying to help you look at things in your past, stored traumas that end up manifesting themselves in the physical. And that's why we go see these medicine people and these healers to help us move that energy through. And um and when we release that energy, things, our body heals, and then things in our lives start to go a little bit smoother. A lot of those things are blockages, points of areas in our lives that uh, become stagnant because of a belief, because of many different reasons. But eventually, I think it all goes back to belief. But in the contact work, we're sort of doing the same thing. We're inviting higher dimensional beings and energies into our field, and it's a healing experience. But during that process, stored traumas and pains and things will get triggered and get released, and that's where the fear kicks in, and that's where a lot of emotions come through, the deep emotions that maybe haven't been felt, because we're allowing these higher frequencies to come in to immerse around us. And in that process, we have to look at ourselves, in a sense, or look at aspects of ourselves that perhaps we've been hiding or holding back on. Um, and once we release that baggage, so to say, those traumas or those attachments to those whatever created the traumas, then we're able to better frequency match these higher beings and make those connections in the physical. So then that allows them to show up in a safe space, so we can have that experience. So a lot of contact work is very therapeutic. It's not just about, oh, I want to go talk to ETs. That's
Yeah.
Of course that's the motivation, but when we understand the mechanics and that we are immersing ourselves in this unconditional love, and making these connections, then a lot of positive things can happen.
I love that. I know for me, it was less of a trauma, or it felt less of a trauma release and more like a remembrance, although it was, or like a recognition, like whatever I was seeing, I recognized it on some level, even though I couldn't remember what it was. It felt like some kind of technology, or there was some sort of, but it was very, very personal and very like deeply meaningful. Um, but again, just, like, completely in my inner eye, I feel like though there was a point where I could open my eye, still could see it, but it did go, it lasted, I can't remember how long, but, um,
It was a good
Judith
one.
yeah, that was amazing. Judith asks if you have to do a lot of hiking to get to these special spots on Mount Shasta, do you know?
In Mount Shasta, the whole mountain is just such a sacred. There's Asara was talking about how when she first moved there, it's like a 50-mile radius around the mountain that you can feel when you just get into the vicinity. There are specific points all around the mountain where people have done ceremony and sacred um, sacred ceremony or healing and these types of things. So I think where those places are, those energetic, like the energy gets built up there. So the portals are a little more perhaps opened in some places more than others. But it's really just that whole vicinity of Mount Shasta is just like a giant portal. So I would imagine you could do the C5 anywhere. People all the time are saying they're seeing ships go into the mountain and come out. And people who live there, yep, give thumbs up for
Yeah.
those. For that. um, so and same with Big Bear. Yeah, where there's I I I do a lot of hiking around Big Bear and breath work. I like to do my breath work outside. And I've noticed just doing the breath work continuously at certain places, I've noticed the energy build in those areas. And that helped me better understand, why these specific areas, even churches where people congregate and have intention, uh, that they're actually building the energy in those places. So there's probably an already existing energy there, that many indigenous spots, South and Central America, and they have their sort of spots to do these ceremonies. And then the Spanish came in and built right on top of those places, and then they put the sun in the door, and they're like, see, this is your God too. They, not really think fully understanding, but kind of understanding enough that if they built the churches on these sacred areas, that they'd be able to tap into that energy. And that's been going on for a long, long time all over there. So I think there is something about cultivating the energies. Yeah. In England, London, uh, uh, Ireland, I felt those places when I went to Ireland. I think a lot of those stone circle places are of the same, these ancient areas built on the ley lines where the veil is thin. So, of course, when you do contact work in areas where the veil is thin, you're more likely to get a little something than not.
Yeah, I love that. Well, tell everybody when the conference is and details about how they can learn more about it and other projects that you're working on.
Yeah, June 20th through the 24th. So it's going to be happening during the summer solstice, which is another gateway portal. These we did our C5 on a new moon. We like to access these portal points. I always look at, this is why, dusk and dawn are so, the golden hour is so important. It's during these transitions from seasons, um, transitions like eclipses or golden hour or moon phases. These are all these are all times on Earth where the veil is a little bit thinner. So again, we try to access these special times to do this work, to make the contact work. So one June 20th to 24th, we're going to be right in the middle of the uh, summer solstice energies. So that the doorways are going to be open. Then we're in Mount Shasta. So we're already in that sort of portal energy. And then we're with the intention with all of these amazing channelers and the energies that they bring in, we're really increasing our chances for
Yeah.
having some sort of um, contact, whether it's the macchiata, the Bigfoot are going to come out and start, sitting in the auditorium with us. We'll see. But
I hope so.
that would be nice. Uh, but for sure, we're increasing our chances with that energy, whether you're sensitive to it or not. There's definitely going to be a lot of people on the same wavelength, connecting in. In Sedona, there's vortices and these types of things too. But this one specifically, I think, and that's part of the coherence that we're trying to bring through with this idea of Lemuria, because again, that it has a special energy to it as well. So that's sort of this focus instead of having a hodgepodge of a bunch of different speakers and different modalities. We're like, no, let's stay focused here. Let's make this about Lemuria, about contact, about bringing back the divine feminine and bringing back this time where there was more coherence in this unconditional love frequency that everybody used to have already, but we all still have it. We just need to remember who we are, where we came from. So the first 2 days are going to be sort of conference style.
With featured speakers.
Yes, sort of your traditional conference style.
Mhm.
Everybody will be in the theater, and every hour we're going to have different speakers and presenting. We'll also be live streaming the event. So if you can't make it, you can tune in later. You can tune in live, but later there'll be a playback too you can tune into. Um, And then the next 2 days after that are going to be workshop days. So all the main speakers, as well as a few additional speakers or teachers, are going to be coming and offering workshops. And it's a more intimate setting. 20 to 30 people to a room, and longer, so that each speaker has a different presentation that they're going to be doing. So that all that stuff's on the website. So we encourage people, you can just come for the conference and sort of skip the workshop part, but a lot of the workshops, not a lot, some of them are going to be offsite, where Asila is going to be taking a group to do some gridding energy work with the land to that actual same spot where I heard the knocking on the trees. Willow's going to be taking people out to Fairy Falls, which is called Fairy Falls because the fairies are quite prominent in that area. A lot of people have sightings and connections with the fairies. And then we'll be going out and doing the C5s as well. So lots going on. And I encourage anybody who does come to try to schedule some time either before or after to really integrate those energies and go out into the land, because there's so many beautiful spots in and around Mount Shasta to explore and connect into.
Beautiful. Elmira? Oh,
No,
you can't
Milford
find
has a question.
yeah, sure. Come on. Let me see. Are you able to unmute? Let me see.
Yes.
Okay.
Hello.
Oh, hello there.
Everyone. Yeah. Actually, first I want to say thank you to Ms. Goodwin and Mr. Langdon. Actually, on a stand from maybe 11 years ago. I used to follow you on Facebook and also studying all of your articles that you posted on your timeline, and also many things. And, also the post about marching against some of the GEO companies
Yeah, yeah.
and kind of things. Yeah.
Wow.
I'm an old fan.
Yeah, you've been going back a long
Yeah.
ways. Thank you.
Actually, I was very young. I was 13 years old and I was very young at that age, but I was so curious to study all of the things. And also, I was a fan and I was, my goal was to study more in order to post something on your timeline to get your attention. It was so funny. And actually, somehow I could say that I grew up with you. And Mr. Langdon, you helped me a lot because I live in Iran. And as you know, Iran is a very restricted country with a lot of limitations.
Yeah.
And, we cannot search on internet in order to gain information. It is very limited. And also the people are also very busy with, repeated patterns, inflation, economical inflation, and those kind of things. And actually, you helped me a lot. And I wanted you guys to know that these kind of webinars are very useful. And I really want to thank you, because people like us that are in those kind of countries, they are only, we want to seek for the truth and we want to learn more, but there is no option. Everywhere is censorship, everywhere is limitation. And I just wanted to come up and thank you for this opportunity and everything. And I just wanted to also thank you for posting many things on your social media, your Facebook, and I understand your effort to make all of the people awake, and you are trying to raise the consciousness, and you are trying to bring everyone to the united consciousness. I also appreciate that, and nothing. I just wanted to share that with you.
Wow. Thank
No
you so
problem.
much, Amilra. Thank you. Wow. What a nice treat. I didn't
That
know
was
it.
beautiful.
Yeah.
Lovely. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, talking about that evolution. So yes, I used to be marching against Monsanto and those, and what was the Occupy movement? I remember those
Oh,
things.
right. Yeah.
My evolution has taken me now, and we're seeing the same with the Palestine movement. That it's beautiful that what's happening in the universities around the world, really, even in Europe and England. I know there's a sort of movement to call out the genocide that's happening in Palestine. But I've also shifted my energy a bit on understanding those types of activist movements. I think at their base, they're quite lovely, and it's good to speak out about those things. But so easily, over time, I've seen how those movements get sort of hijacked or coerced into almost becoming the opposite of what their intention initially was. And I've spoken about this, with the Black Lives Matter and Me Too, and there's just so many movements that start off with really great intentions but I believe it's because of that energy, that sort of fighting, that us versus them energy. It's easy for that. Uh, I don't know what it's called, a parasite, a virus, or something. It's easy for that stuff to get infiltrated, and then
Yeah.
people end up not, they're so focused on, let's make the change, which needs to happen. Absolutely. I'm fully, I'm not saying that that stuff doesn't need to happen, but because they're so hyper focused on the fighting aspect, then the coercion to go to, as we're seeing with the fighting with the police, and then the violence breaks out, and all that stuff ends up getting sort of out of hand and becoming the opposite intention of what it really intended to. So it's
Almost
that's been,
like at any cost,
I
right?
didn't,
It's
yeah,
gotta
and
be
it,
this at any cost, even if, you
right.
know,
And I saw that when mentioned earlier when we were in Portland with the Portland riots, and just it's happened, and I'm seeing that happen with the Palestine stuff too. I think peaceful protesting is great. If there is a way to peacefully protest and not engage in that violence aspects, but it's very difficult because you have so many other interests that understand the psychological mechanics of how us human beings can easily be twitched,
tweaked. Yeah.
tweaked into a negative form. So it hurts my heart to see these movements that initially start off with good intentions get tweaked or get
Inverted.
infiltrated, inverted, and there are instigators. The January 6th stuff. There are FBI instigators that go into these movements to intentionally stir it up to create the chaos. So then they have an excuse to go in and make arrests. That's been it's been a common thing. So it
I'm
just it
reading the book right now called Chaos. Have
mm,
you read that one?
mm-mm.
It's about actually the Charles Manson murders, and it is wild because this reporter, like, kept investigating for years and years and years, like, maybe a decade or 2 decades or something. And he kept going, "I know I'm, like, getting into conspiracy, territory, which I don't like, I don't resonate with this, but I'm just reporting, like, I'm just following these leads, and it doesn't make sense." And the only explanation is this government involvement, like, he's pulling all the layers. It's fascinating, but, like, every step of the way, he keeps coming back to, like, I don't wanna be a conspiracy reporter, but I'm just trying to uncover what's happening, and anyway, chaos is
It and
good word for
when
it.
I think when we realize that as a collective, and we can start to have more discernment. I'm no longer protesting against GMOs in that sense. My protest now is just don't buy them. Just make sure you support local organic farmers and don't give them your money. And yes, the lawsuit that RFK won was a monumental lawsuit, and it's really shifted the perspective. Monsanto's, I think they even went out of business, or they were bought up by Bayer, and their stocks are down, all that stuff. That's great. That's what we need to learn. That's the true battle comes in those forms, where we can have the awareness individually and then collectively. Protesting helps, but it's also very dangerous because we're inviting in an energy that can easily get swayed to the opposite. So, I want, it's hard. I want to encourage people to protest, but not in that way. You know what I mean? Not in a combative, or even just be very careful around the so-called protests. I remember going to an Occupy meeting. This was locally in LA back, I think, what was that, 2010 ish, and in that meeting, I could see, I remember I walked out because the way the organization and the fighting and the energy, and I was like, this is not what this, on the outside is sort of telling everybody that we're gonna protest and we're gonna bring awareness to Wall Street and all the funniness with the banksters. But when I was in the meeting, I was like, this is the opposite. This is not right. And I said, guys, you're on the wrong track here. This is terrible. And then they were like, "Rah," and I'm like, okay, I'm out of here. So,
Wow.
so that was like the beginnings of me realizing that, um, these protests are being hijacked. And now we're finding out George Soros is funding aspects of the Palestine protest. And I don't know if you've heard that,
I
but
didn't know.
yeah, so it's the same with the Black Lives Matter. They, even if, I think these, the big money and other people are really, they understand the mechanics of how to manipulate and take advantage of, even when it's not going so-called their way, like, okay, it seems like humanity's waking up and we're going to, oust the banksters and get rid of the bad guys, that kind of thing. For them, it's all an opportunity to anytime, whether it's for or against their sort of agenda, they're always able to make it for their agenda, which is to create people fighting and separation. So just don't buy into it. So,
Yeah.
Be careful out there, guys. We're in some interesting times.
Yeah. That empowerment is so crucial to
Mhm.
being able to discern. And Patty is joining us from Australia. He woke up in the middle of the night. He's so amazing. Thank you for being here, Patty. He's asking if you have any info about a Mount Shasta like area in Australia. I know of like Ayers Rock. I mean, that's like a magical rock, right? A magical part of the world.
I'm not familiar with Australia. I haven't been to Australia.
Oh, you've spent so much time in the Pacific Rim. I'm surprised.
Yeah, I never made it down there. It's on my bucket list for sure. So I wish I had some answers, but I would say, the Australian Aborigines are said to be some of the most advanced conscious people as far as, the density, like this fourth density consciousness, that they sort of never lost their connection in a sense. Going back to this idea of Lemuria and Mu. So I would say just follow them wherever they go, and whatever they hold sacred to in their culture as a sacred area. I would say you'll probably follow them, and you'll find your connections, like a Mount Shasta kind of connection.
Have you been to Ayers Rock, Patty? I can see you.
No, no, I haven't been to Ayers Rock. I know a little bit about it, but not a lot. But it is apparently it's on a ley line with some of the pyramids in Egypt, and they're going to have a big function there about September, I think. But it's a fair way away.
Yeah, it's in the middle
from
of
where I am.
nowhere, right?
Exactly. Australia has a lot of nowhere in it.
Yeah.
We've got more area than you guys have in mainland USA, but we've
Right.
got about 27 million people. That's all. So they're pretty sparsely spread out. But
That's a good thing. Those are the places you want to go. Those untouched places.
well, yeah, there's certainly plenty of those. But I'm just thinking, there's bound to be something there, but it's so rarely seen because people just aren't there. We have a thing called the min lights, which are out in the middle of nowhere, and they'll just appear and they'll hover around and they'll move towards people that are camping. Apparently, it gets quite spooky.
And they're
I've never
lines?
been- Sorry?
Did you say they're lines?
No, min lights.
Lights. Sorry.
Lights.
Okay.
Just lights, just floating.
Okay.
5 or 10 or 15 feet up above the ground, and they seem to move around and they just seem to haunt people. I know a couple of people that have seen them, and they get a bit intimidated by them, but like the Aboriginals aren't all the same. There's a lot of there's a lot of different communities, probably hundreds, but some of them were very, very warlike. The Kalpadoons up in the north, and then there was another lot in the Palmer River in Queensland that were coppery coloured and bigger than any other Aboriginal.
Hmm.
So where did they come from? And there's
Right.
I can't see any. There must have been something done, but I've never seen any DNA released about them to say where they actually came from.
Oh, interesting.
Because there's where did they come from? Well, that intrigued me, but they look a lot of time. Well, some of the natives, they look a lot like Indians. Some sort of colour and that like that, but I just it seems to be a lot of keeping things in the dark in relation to the history of them.
Yeah, like genealogy.
They just there would have been a lot of money spent on doing the research, but the government doesn't want to, or those that control don't want to release them. It's the Kalpadoons, they were very cannibalistic, very well organized.
Oh,
wow. But
I wouldn't want to hang around that. You
Well,
definitely want to hang around the better
The
intentioned
cannibals.
ones, the non-warring ones, the ones that are a little more open.
Well, you're right there, Reuben, because even like the tribesmen in that area, from other tribes, to this day, they are fearful of them, and they give them a wide berth. They're pretty well shunned by, you might say, their own sort of people, but it's a different scenario. That's where they got that.
One of the things I'm noticing is throughout many of the indigenous cultures that I've interacted with in North America, Central and South America, there is as the frequency of the planet is opening, and as us in, say, the Western world, the more modern, we call it sophisticated. It's not sophisticated by any means, but the more modern, Western world, what we'll just call it that. As we are opening our hearts and we're becoming more respectful of these storylines, I think before there was just so much, this is this, and you're full of this, and nobody's paying attention. But now there's a curiosity that's becoming more and more prevalent throughout the Western world, and a respect for the indigenous teachings and their stories. So as we become curious, then they open up to their stories. So much has been kept secret because they knew that if they were to open up, that we would misuse the information, or make fun of them, or we would, take it and just like the Occupy Wall Street, start out with something good and then it'll get misused. So really, if we can continue on this path, and I'm seeing it already, I'm seeing many, we'll call them wisdom keepers, the ancient, the more traditional indigenous communities that have these stories that they've kept them close to their heart. They are now starting to share. They're still being very selective on who they share with and everything else. And time again, Hollywood has taken their stories and mixed and twisted them and turned them and made them things that they're not. So they're reluctant to share, but we are entering this time now where they're being told by their ancestors in spirit form that it's time to share. So I've noticed just in the past, let's say, decade, many indigenous are starting to open up to the curious ones, to us who may be, as long as we're respectful to the teachings, and we're not going to manipulate or add our own, turn it into a religion, or all that stuff that's happened in the past. As long as we stay pure, then we're going to see more stories are coming out, and more a more invitation from these cultures to allow us to go in there. So, I think just have an open heart and respect, and we'll make those connections.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, Patty.
But use caution when you're talking to cannibals. Definitely.
That's always good advice.
It's always good advice. Yeah. No. Respect, but part of that respect is knowing where to draw the line.
Right, right.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of manipulation being done by people, essentially white people just wanting to feather their own nest and build a bit of a power base. So the Aboriginals are definitely being abused in that way.
And they're on guard, as they should, because especially during COVID. So I saw so much terrible stuff happening to the Aboriginal communities in Australia during the COVID, the main part of COVID, and I'm sure it's still going on now. I there's a lot going on in the world right now, and unfortunately, Australia, with the new central bank digital currencies and the digital IDs, I know that's a battle you guys are fighting right now. It's coming to the States soon. It's happening in Canada. So hang in there, guys. We'll get through this.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I know with, speaking of, and thank you, Patty, for that. It's always lovely to have you here. Matthew talked about this a little bit in the person that we talked about in the beginning of this with the that he's like a master with the drum, and you talked about Bigfoot. But I remember him saying that even with you, like when you kind of came into their fold, they were very like holding you at arm's a little bit suspicious because
Yeah.
you represented the media, and they personally had deceptive experiences with people who pretended that they were, or they on the surface it looked like they wanted to honor
Right.
and report their story, and then when the final product came out, it had been twisted and it wasn't favorable. And so when you came on, you had a little bit of damage control. Even you didn't even realize you were walking into that.
Right. Well, I was just following Bill, and Steve and I were kind of doing our own thing, but we noticed that, Matthew and Heather would pop in and then they're gone, and we're like, oh, okay. And then it really took about 5 days or so for them. And I guess Matthew, what he said is Spirit told him that we were okay.
Um,
And he even though on the surface he's like, I don't, these couple white guys from Hollywood. Yes.
yeah.
So, but Spirit said, gave him a definite, like, no, these guys are cool. You got to open it up. So then he invited us, and he's like, oh, okay. He invited us to Sweat Lodge. And, at that time, actually, we couldn't make it, but we went back, the second and third time we went back and partook, and yeah, it's been awesome.
That's amazing. Good. Well, thank you so much. I've loved this discussion. Thank you, everybody, for hanging on. I know we were supposed to wrap up at 1, or half an hour ago. But
Good conversation.
yes, it was too good to stop. So thank you, Reuben. I love talking to you. I can't wait
Likewise.
for the next one. We'll have to do it again. And thank you for everybody for being here and your great questions. And I wish you all a beautiful rest of the day. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Kara. Appreciate it.
Thanks a lot. Bye, guys.